I bring you greetings, like my colleagues said, from the Faith and Public Integrity Network, representing people working in integrity and corruption around the world, but also from my colleagues at Peace and Hope, serving in 9 countries in Latin America, and from my university, the Center for Reconciliation, Duke in Durham, North Carolina. That's where I am reaching you this morning. So I want to very briefly share with you a case of collective action against corruption in the case of the Peruvian system of justice. I believe that what my dear esteemed colleagues have shared very much have brought light on the need of truly thinking beyond the very small boxes that we typically tend to think about what we can do, which is what we can do as individuals. And I want to invite you to learn about this case, and we can discuss in more detail later. But it is so important that when we are confronting problems of the nature that corruption is in many countries, if not all countries of the global South, and not only the South, we think in collective terms. Let me give you just a couple pieces of information about the context. Peru, like many other countries in the global South, struggles with corruption in many public institutions. The corruption, particularly in the justice system, is infamously widespread. Achieving justice against people with power, may it be economic or political power, and as we know, that those two go always or almost always hand in hand, is virtually impossible. So if you look at this little map, you will see the department of Huánuco is a small province that it's located right between the central Andes of Peru and the Amazon forest. It's a beautiful region. You should visit. And our team in Peace and Hope in Huánuco works particularly to prevent domestic and sexual violence, which is widespread against girls, boys, and women, and also to support survivors in their long journey for integral healing. This long journey, I want to emphasize, the long journey for integral healing has to do with their physical well-being, mental health, of course, their spiritual well-being, but also the right to seek justice against their abusers. So the Peace and Hope team in Huánuco helps survivors in their quest for justice. Most of the population in Huánuco, you must know, are people who live in condition of poverty or extreme poverty. As the team conducted their investigations, they discovered a pattern around 2010. All accusations against alleged rapists of minors in condition of poverty were dismissed by the justice system in a routinary basis. Due to the impossibility of gathering evidence to denounce the corrupt judges and prosecutors, the Peace and Hope team decided that they needed to look beyond the obvious. Like the obvious would be great if we could put together legal evidence against a person and we denounce this person and we get them to face justice, right? But in a system of so much corruption in the justice administration, that was not a possibility. So they had to increase their imagination. And certainly, like my dear friends have demonstrated in their testimonials, they needed courage to defy this reality. So they decided to organize the local population and wait for the magistrate's evaluation process, which is a regular procedure in the administration of justice in Peru. When the time came, they decided they would convene the citizens of Huánuco to learn about what was happening regarding the many cases of abuse against children and why there had been no justice for children who are poor, who had suffered rape. They started in the churches. So allow me to say that actually Christian churches can play a very big role in confronting injustice in particular corruption in many areas. These images that you can see are photos of newspapers on the right hand, and then these efforts to mobilize Christians and everyone on behalf of this situation of corrupt judges and prosecutors. The team, with very much risk to the personally and as an institution for peace and hope, the team there to identify by name the names of the judges, magistrados superiores in Peruvian system, who had systematically dismissed from investigation cases against alleged rapists, including serial rapists, based on a single medical examiner who systematically would issue certificates that would say simply inconclusive evidence of rape. So this one piece of paper given by supposedly a medical expert that would just say inconclusive evidence of rape was taken as sufficient by the judges and prosecutors to say there is no case. As the Peace and Hope Huánuco team mobilized the population, they also reached out to various Christians and other not necessarily faith-based human rights organizations, informing them of their findings. That was how Peace and Hope was able to establish a coalition of citizens, including Christians, evangelicals, local churches, and organizations demanding the justice system to look at the archived criminal investigations on cases of rape against children and teens in Huánuco. I have a list there of the many organizations, some of them Christian organizations and others, that joined efforts in this campaign. They organized non-violent marches from the main Huánuco Plaza all the way towards the building of the Superior Court of Justice of Huánuco to demand that the corrupt judges would not be ratified in their position as superior magistrates. Simultaneously, Peace and Hope and other organizations like Save the Children contacted local journalists and posted on social media to raise attention to the many cases of sexual abuse against children that had no any justice protection from the justice system in Peru. Here we have a few photos of how school children were mobilized to march, churches, the use of art to attract attention from other youth so that people could understand that they had agency against this cancer of corruption. On November 2011, the National Magistrate Council of Peru decided not to ratify those three magistrates and to declare them not qualified for any position in the system of administration of justice in Peru. Since then, the Peace and Hope International Huánuco team has continued with similar strategies to achieve no ratification of corrupt judges and prosecutors. There you have a few names, they are irrelevant right now. But what is important is that despite the smear campaigns that the people who were impacted by this collective action, they had launched, like our brother Mutembo just described, they had launched conspiracy theories against Peace and Hope, saying that we serve survivors of violence and survivors of rape so that we can later traffic them. Obviously false. The harm has been done, of course. Some donors who are not potential donors who are not familiar with our work, when they see those accusations, of course, they have doubts about who these people are, as we are seeking support to continue this kind of work. So this is very consistent with what our brother Mutembo had been describing. Now, I would like to highlight a few of the many relevant points made by my predecessors. So just to remind you, these powerful presentations have highlighted the following. Dr. Martin Alobay has described how changing the system is important, but it is never enough. We need to work simultaneously in transforming the external structures of injustice, but also the internal. We need to seek the transformation of the human heart. And basically, this is the challenge to all of us, to all Christians in particular. Do we love God and people more than we love money, status, and influence? So that's one big lesson from Dr. Alabai. Secondly, echoing the words of Mr. Navalny, who sacrificed his life for the resistance movement in Russia against the dictatorship of Vladimir Putin, everything needed for evil to prevail is for good people to do nothing. And let me add to that, because that's such a powerful lesson, that people are willing, many people are willing to do something, but they need to get organized. They need coordination of efforts. And if we are not willing to sacrifice our time, many of us do this as volunteers. If we are not willing to sacrifice, and we would rather hide in the church to spend time praying and singing, but not willing to mobilize people, I think we are misusing religion. And finally, I would like to also highlight a couple lessons from my dear friend Arpid Wagner. The question, do we have our own house in order? Our local congregations. As we work for integrity in the management of money in our local congregations, in our local agencies, missionary or other agencies, non-governmental organizations, we also need to ask ourselves, how do we use our time? Of course, we need to care for ourselves. We need to rest. We don't want to be burned out. It's very easy in this kind of work to be burned out. Many of you know that. But we need to be good stewards of our money and our time and whatever little power we have, and invest it in organizing people. Without collective action, there is very little we can do. And I think Arpid has said it brilliantly. This work needs time. This work needs perseverance in the long haul. And this work needs a sense of urgency. Thank you so much, Mutembo, for your courage. But I believe your testimonial precisely makes my point that collective action is what we need, not individual people who are willing to just sacrifice their lives, but as a collective. That's why the church exists. The body of Christ in every location needs to understand that this is part of the gospel.